Kossi, a 23-year-old woman, begins her job as a housemaid in the grand mansion of Okello, one of the most powerful politicians in the city. The mansion is impressive, filled with wealth and privilege that seems worlds apart from Kossi's own humble upbringing. As she moves about her new workspace, she reflects on the tragic events that brought her here. Her father was a simple, hard-working man who refused to sell their family land to Demba, a corrupt politician with grand plans to build a hotel. For his resistance, her father was unjustly killed. Now Kossi's mission in life is to seek justice for her father. She hopes that by working in the home of a powerful politician like Okello, she will one day find the opportunity to gather evidence against Demba and expose his crimes. The weight of her mission feels heavy on her shoulders, but she's determined to see it through. However, there are challenges ahead. Not only does Kossi lack resources and formal education, but she must also care for her mentally unresponsive mother, who has not spoken since Kossi's father died 13 years ago. Despite the emotional toll of her past, Kossi remains focused. Her quiet determination and inner strength fuel her every day as she navigates the unfamiliar world of the wealthy. While she's seen as just another servant in the mansion, Kossi knows her purpose is much greater. She believes that one day, justice will be served and she will clear her father's name. But for now, she must remain careful, blending into the background of the mansion, all while keeping her eyes and ears open for any information that might help her cause. As she begins to settle into her duties, Kossi is reminded that in this new environment, she must remain vigilant. Any wrong move could jeopardize her mission. The stakes are high, but Kossi is willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to bring Demba to justice. James, a 28-year-old doctor, arrives back at his family home after years of studying in the United States. He's glad to be back in the city where he grew up, but something feels different. His family's mansion, once a place of warmth, now seems colder, more distant. James has always been the golden child, beloved by his father Okello, yet he feels conflicted about the life his family leads. While James pursued medicine, his father had always wanted him to be part of the political machine that had made their family powerful for generations. Despite his reluctance to get involved in politics, James has been forced to serve as an advisor to his father. It's a role he doesn't enjoy, as he's seen how corrupt the political world can be. James's compassionate nature makes him a better fit for the medical world, where he can help people directly, but his family's expectations weigh heavily on him. Upon his return, he's greeted by a house full of new faces, including Kossi, whom he meets in an unexpected and awkward encounter. On his first day back, James walks into his room after a shower, not expecting anyone to be there. Kossi, unaware that James is in the room, enters to clean and is startled to find him standing in nothing but his underwear. She's embarrassed, and without another word, she quickly apologizes and rushes out of the room. The brief encounter leaves both of them feeling awkward, but it plants the seed of curiosity in James's mind. Who is this new maid, and why does she seem different from the others? As James adjusts to life back at home, he can't help but think about the maid who stumbled upon him in such an embarrassing situation. There's something about her that intrigues him, though he can't quite put his finger on it yet. The next day, Kossi finds herself in the dining room, serving dinner to the family. She keeps her head down, hoping to avoid any awkward encounters with James. But it doesn't take long for her to catch his eye. James, sitting with his family, notices Kossi the moment she enters the room. There's something about her presence that captures his attention, something beyond her beauty. She moves with grace, her quiet demeanor suggesting she's more than just a housemaid. As Kossi serves the family, she can feel James's gaze on her. Their eyes meet for a brief moment, and an unspoken connection seems to pass between them. It's a fleeting glance, but it stirs something in both of them. For James, it's a curiosity that's growing stronger. For Kossi, it's a sense of unease, knowing that she's already made an impression on someone in this powerful household. She reminds herself to stay focused on her mission and not get distracted by the people around her, especially not someone as wealthy as James. After the dinner, James finds himself thinking about Kossi. There's a vulnerability in her that he finds intriguing, but also something deeper, something mysterious. He wants to know more about her, but he senses that she's not someone who will easily open up. Meanwhile, Kossi tries to shake off the feelings she's developing for James. She believes that people like him, people from wealthy families, don't have the capacity for real love. In her mind, they are too consumed by their power and privilege to understand the struggles of someone like her. The tension between them grows, though neither speaks of it. Kossi remains focused on her work, trying to keep her distance from James, while James continues to observe her, trying to understand what it is about her that captivates him. As the days pass, Kossi continues her work in the mansion, but her mind is never far from her true mission. Every task she completes, every room she cleans, is done with a purpose. She's constantly on alert, looking for any clues or information that might help her gather evidence against Demba. But the reality of her situation weighs heavily on her. She doesn't have the education or the resources to fight someone as powerful as Demba, and she knows that her quest for justice is a dangerous one. In addition to her mission, Kossi must also care for her mother, who remains mentally unresponsive. Her mother's condition has been a constant burden since the death of Kossi's father. Kossi often spends her free time tending to her mother, speaking to her even though she never responds. She hopes that one day her mother will wake up from the trauma. But deep down, Kossi fears that she will never hear her mother's voice again. It's a pain she carries with her every day, but it only strengthens her resolve to seek justice. Despite the emotional toll, Kossi refuses to give up. Her father's death was an injustice, and she won't rest until Demba is held accountable. But living in the mansion, surrounded by wealth and privilege, makes her mission even harder. She feels like an outsider, a woman with no power, in a world dominated by those who can bend the rules to their will. The more she observes the lives of the rich, the more determined she becomes to expose the corruption that took her father's life. Kossi's struggle is not just external, but internal as well. She battles with her own emotions, particularly the feelings that are beginning to grow for James. She knows that allowing herself to care for someone like him could derail her mission. She has to stay focused, even as her heart begins to soften toward the kind yet distant man who seems so interested in her. James becomes more intrigued by Kossi as the days pass. He notices the care and attention she gives to her work and to the people around her, even though she tries to remain invisible. Her quiet strength and resilience catch his eye. Unlike the other staff members, Kossi has a calm yet determined energy that James finds captivating. He wonders what her story is and why she always seems so guarded. He also begins to notice the small, thoughtful acts she does, like checking in on the elderly butler or making sure the kitchen staff are well taken care of. James, being a naturally compassionate person due to his medical background, finds himself wanting to help her. One day, he gently asks her about her day, noticing the wariness in her eyes. Kossi, caught off guard by his kindness, answers briefly but remains distant. She appreciates his concern, but her mission is too important to allow herself to get close to anyone, especially not someone from a world so different from hers. Despite her guardedness, Kossi begins to feel a sense of safety when James is around. She's not used to people from wealthy families caring about her well-being, but James is different. His gestures are small but meaningful, like offering her advice on how to care for her mother's health. Kossi is torn between her growing feelings for him and her fear that getting close to him could compromise everything she's working toward. As James continues to show her kindness, Kossi's defenses slowly start to lower, though she's still hesitant to let him in. She knows that any emotional involvement with James could complicate her mission. But with every passing day, it becomes harder for her to ignore the connection forming between them. Kossi's internal conflict intensifies as her feelings for James grow. She knows that allowing herself to care for him could derail her mission to expose Demba. Every time she looks at James, she is reminded of the danger she faces if she loses focus. Her father's death is still a raw wound, and she can't afford to let her emotions interfere with her quest for justice. But despite her best efforts to keep her distance, James's kindness is starting to chip away at the walls she's built around her heart. She finds herself thinking about him more than she would like to admit. His gentle presence, His thoughtful gestures, and the way he seems genuinely interested in her well-being, make her feel seen in a way she hasn't felt in a long time. But alongside those feelings of warmth and safety, there is fear. Fear that James, like the other wealthy people she has known, will never truly understand her world or her mission. Kossi spends her nights lying awake, torn between her growing affection for James and her need to stay focused on her father's justice. She tells herself over and over again that she cannot afford to get distracted. But her heart is betraying her, making it harder to ignore the connection she feels with him. Her mind keeps returning to their brief moments together, the way he looks at her, the gentle tone in his voice when he speaks to her. As much as Kossi tries to stay focused, she can't shake the feeling that James is different from the other wealthy men she's encountered. He's not arrogant or dismissive of her like the others. But her mission is clear, and she can't let herself forget why she's really here. Her father's memory is too important to let anything, even her growing feelings for James, get in the way. While Kossi grapples with her internal conflict, James becomes more and more drawn to her. He starts to make more of an effort to speak with her when their paths cross in the mansion. At first, their conversations are brief and surface level, but each interaction leaves James wanting to know more about her. He can see that Kossi is not like the other maids. She carries herself with a quiet dignity that intrigues him, and there's a mystery about her that he can't quite unravel. James starts to ask Kossi subtle questions, hoping to learn more about her life and what brought her to his family's home. But Kossi remains tight-lipped, only offering small glimpses into her past. This only deepens James's curiosity. He begins to notice the sadness in her eyes, the way she seems to be carrying a burden that no one else sees. He suspects that there is much more to her story than she's letting on. In his quiet moments, James reflects on his own life. He feels trapped by his family's expectations, especially his father's desire for him to follow in his political footsteps. James has always felt out of place in the world of wealth and power. His passion is medicine, helping people in need, and that's where he feels most fulfilled. Kossi, with her humble background and caring nature, seems to represent a different path, one that James finds increasingly appealing. Despite the growing feelings between them, James senses that Kossi is holding back. He doesn't know why, but he's determined to find out. He can feel the connection between them, but he respects her space, waiting for the right moment to dig deeper. Little does he know, Kossi's secrets run deeper than he could ever imagine. Just as James and Kossi's connection begins to deepen, a significant obstacle emerges. Kossi starts to feel overwhelmed by her growing emotions for James. She knows that getting involved with someone from his world is dangerous, not just for her heart but for her mission. The class differences between them are glaring, and Kossi can't shake the feeling that someone like James could never truly understand her struggles or the importance of her quest for justice. In her mind, wealthy people like James don't have time for love or for the kind of life she wants to lead. She doesn't belong in his world, and the more she lets herself fall for him, the more she feels like she's betraying her father's memory. She tries to convince herself that James could never understand the pain she carries, the loss she suffered, and the danger she faces if Demba finds out what she's up to. At the same time, Kossi's focus on bringing Demba to justice is becoming all-consuming. She knows that she can't afford to be distracted by her feelings for James. She's already spent years trying to find a way to expose Demba's crimes, and she's closer than ever to finding the evidence she needs. But with each passing day, her growing feelings for James make her question whether she can truly keep her mission and her heart separate. Sensing Kossi's hesitation, James grows frustrated. He can't understand why she's pulling away, especially when he feels the connection between them so strongly. He wants to help her, to be there for her, but Kossi's walls are up, and she's not ready to let him in. This marks the first real obstacle in their budding relationship, as both of them struggle to navigate their feelings and the complex realities of their respective worlds. Kossi's resolve to bring Demba to justice intensifies as she continues working in the mansion. She knows that the closer she gets to James, the greater the risk of being discovered. She begins sneaking around the mansion in the dead of night, hoping to find any information that could lead her closer to Demba's downfall. Her fear of being caught keeps her constantly on edge, but she refuses to give up. The memory of her father's unjust death fuels her every move. In her search for evidence, Kossi overhears conversations among Okello's associates. These powerful men, with their grand business deals and casual discussions about their influence, remind her just how dangerous Demba's world is. One evening, Kossi overhears a conversation about an upcoming political event where Demba is expected to make an appearance. This gives her hope that she might be able to confront him or gather information that could help her case. However, she knows that attending such an event would be dangerous, especially for someone like her. James, meanwhile, notices that something is different about Kossi. He sees the way she moves through the house, her face always tense, as if she's carrying a heavy burden. He begins to wonder what secrets she's hiding. Though he doesn't know the details, James senses that Kossi is involved in something far more serious than she lets on. Despite his growing curiosity, he decides to give her space, waiting for the right moment to approach her. Kossi continues her secretive efforts, but the closer she gets to finding the evidence she needs, the more dangerous her situation becomes. She knows that if Demba or any of his associates discover her true intentions, it could cost her everything, her job, her safety, and perhaps even her life. But Kossi refuses to let fear control her. She's willing to take the risk if it means finally getting justice for her father. James's curiosity about Kossi only grows as he watches her more closely. He's worried about her. She seems so tense, as though she's constantly looking over her shoulder. One night, he decides to confront her, hoping to offer his help. He finds Kossi sneaking through the hallway, obviously distracted and on a mission. James calls her name softly, and she freezes. She knows she's been caught, but there's no way out. Her heart pounds as she turns to face him, fearing that her secret might be exposed. "Are you all right?" James asks gently, his concern evident in his voice. Kossi, caught off guard, doesn't know how to respond. She wants to trust him, but the stakes are too high. She tells him she's just feeling stressed and needed some air, but James isn't convinced. He steps closer, his expression soft but firm. "Kossi, I can tell something is wrong. If you need help, you can trust me," he says, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, Kossi considers telling him the truth, but her fear of Demba and the danger it could bring stops her. Instead, she thanks James for his concern and assures him that everything is fine, though they both know that's not the case. James doesn't press the issue, respecting her need for privacy, but he makes it clear that he's there for her if she ever needs him. This small act of protection, though subtle, leaves Kossi feeling both grateful and conflicted. As they part ways, Kossi can't help but feel a sense of comfort, knowing that James cares about her. But she knows she must remain focused on her mission. James's kindness only makes it harder for her to keep her distance, and her growing feelings for him continue to complicate her already dangerous situation. Just as Kossi begins to feel a deeper connection with James, a new complication arises. Zoe, Demba's daughter, returns to the city. Zoe is beautiful, confident, and sophisticated. Everything Kossi feels she isn't. She's also known James since childhood, and their families have always hoped that they would one day marry. Zoe has always harbored feelings for James, and with her return, she makes it clear that she intends to pursue him. Zoe's presence immediately creates tension in the household. Kossi, who has been growing closer to James, begins to doubt herself even more. She watches from the sidelines as Zoe and James interact, their shared history evident in every conversation and every laugh. Zoe is the perfect match for James in every way, wealthy, well-educated, and socially connected. Kossi feels her heart sinking, realizing just how wide the gap between her and James truly is. James, on the other hand, feels conflicted about Zoe's return. While their families have always been close, he has never felt romantically inclined toward her. Zoe is everything that his world expects him to want in a partner, but James's heart is drawn elsewhere, to Kossi. Still, the pressure from his family and Zoe's assertive pursuit of him create a complicated situation. James feels trapped between the expectations of his family and his growing feelings for Kossi. Kossi watches Zoe and James from a distance, her insecurities growing with each passing day. She knows that she could never compete with someone like Zoe. The more she sees them together, the more she questions whether James could ever truly be with someone like her. The class differences, which were always in the back of her mind, now feel impossible to ignore. The pressure becomes too much for Kossi. Between her mission to bring down Demba, her growing feelings for James, and the constant reminder that she doesn't belong in his world, Kossi decides to emotionally retreat. She begins avoiding James, keeping her distance whenever they cross paths in the mansion. The pain of seeing him with Zoe is more than she can handle, and she convinces herself that it's better for both of them if she pulls away. Kossi reminds herself of why she's really here, to expose Demba's corruption and bring justice for her father. Falling for James was never part of the plan, and she fears that her feelings for him are distracting her from her mission. She can't afford to lose focus now, especially with Zoe in the picture, reminding her of the stark differences between her and James. The class divide between them feels more real than ever, and Kossi begins to believe that a future with James is impossible. James, meanwhile, is confused and frustrated by Kossi's sudden distance. He doesn't understand why she's pulling away, especially after the moments they've shared. He wants to help her, to be there for her, but Kossi's walls are up again, and he can't break through them. The tension between them grows, and James feels powerless to fix it. His feelings for Kossi are undeniable, but he's beginning to realize that there are forces beyond his control that are keeping them apart. Kossi spends her nights agonizing over her decision to distance herself from James. She misses him, but she knows that getting involved with him could complicate everything. Her mission for justice is too important to risk, and she tells herself that walking away from James is the only way to stay focused. But her heart is in turmoil, torn between her duty to her father's memory and the love she's beginning to feel for James. Despite Kossi's efforts to keep her distance from James, fate pulls them back together in an unexpected way. One evening, after a particularly emotional day, Kossi finds herself alone in the garden, trying to clear her head. She's overwhelmed by everything: her mission, the pressure of staying hidden, her growing feelings for James, and the constant reminder that Zoe is a better match for him. As she sits on the bench, staring at the night sky, she feels the weight of the world on her shoulders. James, sensing her emotional retreat, goes looking for her. When he finds her sitting alone, he quietly joins her, sitting beside her without saying a word. The silence between them is comforting, and for the first time in days, Kossi feels like she can breathe. James doesn't press her to talk, but his presence is enough to make her feel less alone. As the moments pass, Kossi's defenses begin to crumble. She doesn't want to admit it, but being near James brings her a sense of peace she hasn't felt in a long time. After a while, Kossi opens up. She doesn't tell him everything, but she shares some of the pain she's been carrying. She talks about her father's death, her mother's unresponsive state, and the overwhelming pressure she feels to make things right. James listens intently, his heart aching for her. He doesn't pry, but he offers her quiet support, letting her know that he's there for her no matter what. That night, they share an intimate moment. Kossi allows herself to be vulnerable with James, something she hasn't done with anyone in a long time. They spend the night together in his room, away from the pressures of the world outside. It's a moment of solace and connection, but even in the midst of their intimacy, Kossi knows that their relationship is far from simple. The next morning, as they part ways, James's siblings notice the shift between them, and suspicions about their relationship begin to grow. The morning after their night together, Kossi and James's relationship takes on a new, deeper layer, though neither of them speaks openly about it. However, the subtle shift between them doesn't go unnoticed. James's siblings, especially his older brother, begin to suspect that something is going on between him and Kossi. They don't confront him directly, but their disapproving looks and whispered conversations behind closed doors make James realize that their relationship is becoming a source of gossip in the household. Meanwhile, the pressure on James to marry Zoe intensifies. His family, especially his father, sees Zoe as the perfect match for him. The two families have been friends for years, and a marriage between James and Zoe would solidify their political and social ties. Okello, though he loves his son, subtly pushes him toward Zoe, reminding him of the importance of family legacy and duty. James, already conflicted about his role in the political world, feels the weight of his family's expectations bearing down on him. Zoe, too, makes her intentions clear. She begins spending more time at the mansion, often seeking out James for private conversations or suggesting outings together. Her presence is constant, and while James doesn't reciprocate her romantic feelings, he feels trapped by the situation. He knows that a relationship with Zoe would be easy. It would please his family, maintain their social standing, and keep him within the world he's always known. But his heart is with Kossi, even though their relationship is far more complicated. Kossi, sensing the growing tension, begins to retreat even further. She knows that James is under pressure to marry Zoe, and she feels that their relationship is doomed from the start. The class divide between them, the family expectations, and her mission for justice all seem like insurmountable obstacles. Kossi convinces herself that walking away from James is the only way to protect them both from further pain. While the tension between Kossi and James simmers, Demba becomes aware of Kossi's growing closeness to James. Sensing that she might be a threat, Demba makes his move. One evening, Kossi receives a chilling message. It's a warning from Demba himself, threatening her to stay out of his affairs and to stop digging into his past. Demba makes it clear that he knows who she is and what she's after, and if she continues down this path, both she and James will suffer the consequences. The message shakes Kossi to her core. She's always known that pursuing justice against Demba was dangerous, but now the danger feels all too real. Demba is powerful, ruthless, and willing to destroy anyone who stands in his way. Kossi realizes that if she doesn't back down, she could lose everything, including her life. But even more than that, she fears for James. Demba's threat extends to him as well, and the thought of James being harmed because of her mission fills her with guilt and fear. James, unaware of the full extent of Demba's threat, continues to stand by Kossi. He can see that something is wrong, but Kossi refuses to tell him about the warning she received. She doesn't want to put him in any more danger than he already is. However, the weight of the secret is heavy, and it creates a growing distance between them. Kossi begins to consider the possibility of ending their relationship for good, believing that it's the only way to protect James from Demba's wrath. Meanwhile, Demba ramps up the pressure on James to marry his daughter, Zoe. He uses his political influence to push James's family into encouraging the union, making it clear that a marriage between James and Zoe would be beneficial for both families. James, now caught between his feelings for Kossi and the growing pressure to marry Zoe, feels more trapped than ever. The pressure on James to marry Zoe reaches a breaking point. His family, sensing the opportunity to solidify their political and social ties with Demba, subtly pushes him toward a formal engagement. Zoe, confident in her place within James's world, begins dropping hints about their future together, assuming that James will eventually fall in line with what their families expect. The weight of expectation becomes unbearable for James, who feels like he's being suffocated by the life that's been chosen for him. At the same time, his feelings for Kossi continue to grow, despite the complications between them. James can't stop thinking about her strength, her vulnerability, and the way she's become such an important part of his life. But with Demba's growing influence and his family's insistence on the engagement, James feels like he's being pulled in two different directions. On one hand, there's the life he's always known, the life that would be easy and expected. On the other hand, there's Kossi, the woman who has changed everything for him. Kossi, meanwhile, is torn. She knows that James is being pressured to marry Zoe, and she feels like there's no way for them to be together. The class divide between them, the expectations of James's family, and Demba's threats all seem like insurmountable obstacles. Kossi believes that the best thing she can do is walk away, even though it breaks her heart. She begins distancing herself from James again, trying to convince herself that it's for the best. James, sensing that he's losing Kossi, feels helpless. He wants to fight for her, but but the pressure from his family and Demba is overwhelming. The idea of a future with Kossi seems increasingly impossible, and for the first time, James begins to question whether he'll ever be able to break free from the life that's been laid out for him. Kossi finds herself at a crossroads. The pressure of her mission, her growing love for James, and the threats from Demba weigh heavily on her mind. She spends long nights contemplating her next move, torn between staying in James's life or leaving to protect him from the inevitable dangers that come with her pursuit of justice. Every time she looks at James, her heart aches with the knowledge that being with him might put him in harm's way. As she considers her options, Kossi reflects on her father's death. The injustice of it all drives her forward, but she now sees the heavy cost of her quest. She wonders if it's worth risking James's life, the one person who has shown her genuine care. The world James belongs to is not hers, and she knows their relationship can never be fully accepted by his family or the society they live in. But the love she feels for him is undeniable, and the thought of walking away from him breaks her heart. During this time, Kossi withdraws even further from James, believing that distancing herself will keep him safe. James, frustrated and hurt by Kossi's retreat, doesn't understand why she is pulling away from him again. He feels that something has shifted, but every time he tries to talk to her, Kossi closes herself off. It's a painful cycle of miscommunication, with both of them struggling to protect each other in their own ways. Eventually, Kossi comes to a difficult decision. She resolves to continue her mission to bring Demba to justice, no matter the cost. But she also decides that she must leave James's life to protect him from the fallout. Kossi believes that walking away from their love is the only way to ensure James's safety, even though it tears her apart inside. With this decision weighing heavily on her, Kossi begins to prepare herself for the final steps of her plan. Kossi finally gathers the last piece of evidence she needs to expose Demba's corruption. After months of careful planning and risky moves, she now holds the key to bringing him down. The evidence is damning. A collection of documents and recordings that prove Demba's involvement in illegal land deals, including the one that led to her father's death. Kossi knows that with this evidence, she can finally seek justice for her father and reveal Demba's crimes to the world. But even with the evidence in her hands, Kossi is filled with fear. She knows that Demba will stop at nothing to protect his power, and if he finds out that she's the one who has gathered this information, her life could be in danger. Worse, she worries that if James is linked to her, he could be targeted as well. Kossi is prepared to sacrifice her own safety, but she can't bear the thought of James being hurt because of her mission. James, still confused by Kossi's recent behavior, notices that she seems even more tense than usual. He tries to talk to her, but Kossi remains distant, determined to keep him out of the dangers that lie ahead. She knows that the moment she reveals the evidence, everything will change. Her life will no longer be the quiet, hidden existence she's maintained at Okello's mansion. Kossi is ready for this, but she fears for James's future. As she prepares to take the next step, Kossi contemplates reaching out to James one last time to explain everything. But she hesitates, knowing that doing so could put him in even more danger. In the end, Kossi decides to keep her plan to herself, determined to face the storm on her own. Just as Kossi is about to present the evidence that will expose Demba's corruption, disaster strikes. Demba, always one step ahead, manages to sabotage her efforts before she can take the evidence to the authorities. Using his network of political allies, Demba has Kossi arrested on false charges, framing her for crimes she didn't commit. The evidence that she worked so hard to gather is taken from her, and Kossi finds herself trapped in a nightmare she never expected. With Kossi imprisoned, her mission for justice seems to be falling apart. She's left vulnerable, without any means to defend herself. Worse, Demba's influence ensures that no one in power is willing to hear her case. It's clear that Demba will do whatever it takes to keep his corruption hidden, even if it means destroying Kossi's life. She's locked away, feeling hopeless and defeated, with her father's memory weighing heavily on her heart. James, upon hearing the news of Kossi's arrest, is devastated. He knows that Kossi would never commit the crime she's been accused of, and he quickly realizes that Demba is behind the false charges. James is furious and determined to help Kossi, but he faces a difficult decision. Standing up for Kossi means defying his family, Demba, and the political world he's always been a part of. It's a choice that could cost him everything. As James contemplates his next move, Demba and James's father begin pressuring him even more to marry Zoe. They believe that James needs to distance himself from the scandals surrounding Kossi and focus on his family's future. James, torn between his love for Kossi and his loyalty to his family, finds himself at a critical crossroads. Will he choose to protect the woman he loves, or will he give in to the expectations of his family and the powerful forces surrounding him? With Kossi behind bars and Demba's influence growing stronger, James knows that he can no longer remain silent. He makes the life-changing decision to stand by Kossi publicly, defying his family, Demba, and the entire political establishment. In a bold move, James confronts his father and Demba, making it clear that he will not allow Kossi to be sacrificed for the sake of political convenience. James knows that this decision could cost him his family's support and reputation, but he's willing to risk everything to protect Kossi. James's decision sends shockwaves through his family. His father is furious, accusing James of betraying the family and jeopardizing their political future. Zoe, who has been waiting for James to commit to their engagement, is humiliated and angry. Demba, seeing James as a threat to his power, begins to take even more drastic measures to keep his corruption hidden. But despite the backlash, James stands firm. He knows that Kossi is innocent, and he's determined to prove it. James quickly mobilizes his resources, using his connections in the legal and medical fields to gather evidence that could clear Kossi's name. He reaches out to friends and allies who are willing to challenge Demba's influence, even at great personal risk. It's a dangerous move, but James is willing to do whatever it takes to free Kossi and bring Demba to justice. Meanwhile, Kossi, still in prison, learns of James's decision to stand by her. She's overwhelmed with gratitude and love, but also fear. She knows that James's involvement could put him in even more danger, and she's terrified that Demba will retaliate against him. But deep down, Kossi feels a renewed sense of hope. With James by her side, she believes that they might have a chance to defeat Demba and finally achieve the justice she's been fighting for. With the help of his allies, James manages to secure a court hearing for Kossi, where she will have the opportunity to present her case against Demba. The courtroom is packed with politicians, journalists, and spectators, all waiting to see how this scandal will unfold. Demba arrives with his usual air of arrogance, confident that his power and influence will protect him from any consequences. He believes that the evidence against him has been destroyed, and Kossi is no longer a threat. But Demba underestimates James's resolve and Kossi's determination. Unbeknownst to Demba, James has been working behind the scenes to recover the stolen evidence and gather additional proof of Demba's corruption. With the help of his connections and Kossi's meticulous research, James presents the evidence that proves Demba's illegal activities, including his role in the land deal that led to the death of Kossi's father. As the evidence is laid out before the court, the room falls silent. Demba's smug expression fades as the weight of the accusations begins to sink in. Kossi, standing beside James, feels a surge of emotion. This is the moment she has been fighting for all these years, the moment where the truth about her father's death is finally revealed. The evidence is undeniable, and the court has no choice but to investigate further. Demba, realizing that his empire is crumbling, makes a desperate attempt to silence Kossi and James. He uses his remaining influence to try to have the evidence discredited and the case dismissed, but it's too late. The tide has turned, and the public is now aware of Demba's crimes. His political career is in ruins, and his power is slipping away. The final showdown between Kossi, James, and Demba comes to a dramatic conclusion as the court announces that Demba will be formally charged with corruption and fraud. With Demba officially charged, his political empire begins to collapse. His allies distance themselves from him, fearing that they too will be implicated in the scandal. The media covers every aspect of the trial, and the once untouchable politician is now the center of public outrage. Kossi's evidence has not only exposed Demba's corruption, but has also sparked a larger investigation into other corrupt practices within the government. The ripple effect of her actions is felt throughout the political landscape. For Kossi, this victory is bittersweet. She has finally achieved justice for her father, and Demba will be held accountable for his crimes. But the cost of this battle has been high. She spent years living in fear, hiding her true mission from the world, and putting her life at risk to bring the truth to light. Now that Demba has been defeated, Kossi can finally breathe a sigh of relief, but she knows that the scars of this journey will stay with her forever. James, too, feels the weight of the battle they fought together. He's proud of Kossi's courage and determination, and he's grateful that he was able to stand by her in the end. But James has also sacrificed a great deal. His family, especially his father, remains furious with him for defying their expectations and standing against Demba. James's decision to break away from the political world has cost him his family's approval, but he knows that it was the right thing to do. As Demba's trial moves forward, Kossi and James begin to think about the future. For the first time in a long time, they feel free from the fear of Demba's power, free from the weight of their pasts, and free to build a life together without the looming threat of corruption hanging over them. With Demba's defeat, Kossi and James's relationship can finally move forward without the shadow of corruption hanging over them. The public recognizes Kossi for her bravery in exposing Demba, and her story becomes an inspiration to others who have faced similar injustices. Kossi, once a humble housemaid, is now a symbol of courage and resilience. The media praises her for standing up to the powerful forces that tried to silence her, and she becomes a voice for others seeking justice. James, too, is publicly recognized for his role in helping Kossi expose Demba's crimes. Though his family initially disapproved of his actions, they begin to see the value in what he and Kossi have accomplished. Slowly, James's family starts to accept that their world of power and privilege isn't the only way to make a difference. His father, though still disappointed that James chose to leave politics, comes to respect his son's decision to stand by Kossi and fight for what is right. Kossi and James's bond grows stronger as they begin to plan their future together. They talk about the life they want to build, free from the pressures of the political world that once controlled their every move. For Kossi, the victory over Demba means that she can finally live without the constant fear of retribution. She can finally honor her father's memory, knowing that justice has been served. James, having left behind the life of privilege and expectation, feels a sense of peace he has never known before. He's ready to embrace a new path, one that is rooted in love, honesty, and integrity. Together, he and Kossi begin to dream of a life where they can create something meaningful, not through power or wealth, but through their shared values and commitment to each other. Though the journey to justice has been long and difficult, Kossi and James's love for each other has survived the many trials they've faced. James's family, who once looked down on Kossi because of her background, now sees her strength and integrity. They realize that Kossi has brought out the best in James, showing him a world beyond the confines of their wealth and privilege. Slowly but surely, they begin to accept her as part of the family. James's father, who was once adamant that James should marry Zoe and follow in the family's political footsteps, finally admits that he was wrong. He sees that James and Kossi have a bond that goes beyond social status and family expectations. While it's not easy for him to let go of his ambitions for James, he ultimately respects his son's decision to build a life with Kossi. The family reconciliation brings a sense of closure for James, who has struggled with his family's disapproval for so long. Kossi, too, feels a sense of belonging for the first time. After years of being an outsider, both in James's world and in her own, she now feels accepted and valued. The reconciliation with James's family allows her to finally let go of the insecurities she once carried. She knows that she and James are stronger together, and nothing can stand in their way. Together, Kossi and James begin to plan their future. They dream of a life filled with love, purpose, and mutual respect. The road ahead won't always be easy, but they know that they can face any challenge as long as they have each other. The story comes to a beautiful conclusion as Kossi and James get married in an intimate ceremony surrounded by their closest friends and family. The wedding is a celebration not only of their love, but also of the triumph of justice over corruption. Kossi, who once believed that love and happiness were out of reach for someone like her, now stands by James's side, ready to embark on a new chapter of her life. The ceremony is simple but meaningful, reflecting the values that Kossi and James hold dear. They have chosen a life that is free from the pressures of wealth and power, and they are committed to building a future together that is rooted in love and integrity. As they exchange their vows, Kossi feels a sense of peace and fulfillment that she has never known before. She has fought for justice, she has found love, and now she is ready to begin a new life with James by her side. After the wedding, Kossi and James move away from the city to start a new life together in a quieter, more peaceful place. They leave behind the political chaos and the pressures of the world they once knew, choosing instead to focus on what truly matters: each other and the life they want to build together. As they settle into their new life, Kossi and James reflect on the journey that brought them to this point. They have faced countless challenges, but through it all, they have remained true to themselves and to each other. Their love has been tested and strengthened by the trials they've endured, and they know that they are ready for whatever the future holds. With Demba's defeat behind them and their new life ahead, Kossi and James step forward into the world, united by love, justice, and the shared values that brought them together.